Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, January 11th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 235 days. The game against Michigan in 320 days. One of the most popular defensive backs in Ohio State football history is now a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. Mike Doss, a three-time All-American and a key contributor to the 2002 National Championship team, will be inducted a little later on this year. He is the first Buckeye named to the Hall of Fame since Keith Byers back in 2020. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop's Tony Gerdeman. He is so old. He is alive. He was alive when Mike Doss was a player, which was apparently a million years ago, because we are all a million years old. Tony, thanks as always for joining me.
Tom, I feel like this entire episode is just going to be us dating ourselves in more horrific ways with each comment. And thank you for having me, Tom, even though it's going to be a painful show.
We were talking before the show and we were running through the list and it was like, that guy can't possibly be eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame yet, can he? And then it's just, oh, that guy played when I was in college. Oh, that guy played after I was in college. Oh, that guy played after I was married and had kids. Like, oh, Lord. Oh, no, I'm a million years old now. I guess let's start with some happier memories before we start pondering our mortality too much. This time of year is always one of those times of year when I think of Mike Doss, because I remember he had in January of 2002, this was 1 year after Jim Tressel took over, Mike Doss, everyone's expecting him to go pro. He has a press conference and he announces he is not going pro. He is coming back for his senior season at Ohio State. And it always felt to me like that was kind of the start of what turned out to be a very big season in Ohio State football history.
It was. And I don't know how many people remember this or even were aware, but like I remember seeing that 2002 schedule and seeing everybody that was coming back and thinking they could legitimately win it all this year. And Mike Doss is part of that reason why, because he was a playmaker. He was a clutch defender. Say what you want about the Purdue game in 2000 or whatever it was, but he was exactly the kind of guy that you needed to lead. And he was a two-time All-American before he announced he was coming back for his senior season. This guy he was a legend as he was playing. He was like a living legend when he was playing at Ohio State, and him saying he's coming back. And I remember, I remember Phil Steele had Ohio State, I think number 13 in his poll in 2002 to start the season. And I'm like, just wait. You got Mike Doss. You got, this is during the Maurice Claret era where everybody knew he was going to be really good. Didn't know how good, didn't know how all of that was going to shake out. But you had the solid defense. You had Mike Doss in the back end to fix what was going to happen. And also, Tom, to knock the crap out of people if they ever got in his way.
Mike Doss was, sometimes people talk about guys who would have, boy, I would love to see him play in this era. It's like, I feel like you would watch Mike Doss play a lot of halves of football in this era. Like it was like him and Jack Tatum are two guys that just like, I don't know if that would translate that well to the targeting era of college football, but yeah, a very big hitter. And I mean, you mentioned the 2000 Purdue game in the back end of that defense. And, that was not, he is not the first person that Drew Brees has thrown a pass over his head in his career. And he was not the last either, but he was also at the center of some very, very big moments in Ohio State history, some like key interceptions in huge games. I'll let you go first. Do you have a greatest memory of Mike Doss playing at Ohio State?
The first memory that I have is probably not the greatest, which is the Kurt Kittner hit where he bounced Illinois quarterback Kurt Kittner's head off the turf when Kittner was sliding. And that would have been certainly a penalty for hitting a sliding quarterback. Then another one for I don't know if there was a headshot in there. I know there was a head bouncing off, but he also had an interception in the national championship game against Miami. Nearly took that back at a key moment in that game. But there's, I think for me, like those are the first two. When you say your first two memories, those are the first two that stand out for me. But if I were, and he almost predates, I think he kind of does predate the YouTube highlight films, because you look at the Ted Ginn ones and they're grainy as heck. And Ted Ginn was 2 years and beyond after him. But there were some really, really good moments. He was, like I said, he found the ball, whether it was as a run stopper or as a guy who was pretty good as a pass defender. I know maybe he doesn't fit into today's game as much as the back line of defense, but he made some plays on the football, and I don't know offhand how many he took back for pick six, but it feels like a couple.
Yeah, he had a couple big plays. You mentioned the one in the national championship game, that interception. That one came pretty late. That came pretty late in the half. That was still 7-0 Miami with 5 minutes and some change left. He intercepted the ball at the 48, returned it 35 yards down to the Miami 17. That set up Ohio State's first touchdown of the game, made it 7-7. And then Ohio State immediately had a strip sack of Ken Dorsey on the next drive, and immediately converted that into another touchdown. All of a sudden, in the span of, I'm reading a very old box score right now. All of a sudden, in the span of basically 4 minutes, it went from 7-0 Miami to 14-7 Ohio State, and it was like, this might in fact be a game. This is not Ohio State just kind of barely hanging on, but it all started with that Doss interception. I think it was Jim Davidson, who has a great picture of, you can see Doss returning the interception and Kirk Herbstreit in the background, like jumping up in the air with excitement. That was a big play. The
other one, George in that photo as well.
Oh yeah, Eddie George was there. Yep. So yeah, there was that was one of the key momentum swings in that game, was that Doss interception. The other one that sprang to mind immediately was the 2001 Michigan game, where Michigan's opening drive, John Navarre gets picked off by Doss. He runs it back. He got picked off. It was at the 39-yard line. He ran it back to the Michigan 4. You can, if you close your eyes, you can probably see him sliding out of bounds into the Ohio State band as he runs that back in. And it took a couple plays, but then Ohio State Jonathan Wells ran a touchdown in to make it 7-0. And that was another one that was like, oh, that's interesting. That this might actually happen. This is back when Ohio State never beat Michigan up in Ann Arbor, ever. So that was another big momentum swing play. So that's Mike Doss. We'll just run through a couple of the other guys who were, notable names in this year's Hall of Fame class, because someone Ohio State fans will probably not have quite so many fond memories of is LeVar Arrington. You can think of your favorite LeVar Arrington Ohio State memory. I'll steal one from an Illinois game, since no one ever remembers Illinois games. You just Google LeVar Leap. That was one of the more impactful, both in terms of highlights and terms of literal physics, plays in probably the last quarter century of college football. Very famous play. Fantastic linebacker. Back when Penn State actually was linebacker U, they still kind of use that, but it's like, it hasn't been true for a while. It was definitely true in the LeVar Arrington era. He was those Penn State teams in the late 90s, like they didn't win. The 94 team was the one that probably should have shared a national championship. But some of those teams in the late 90s were right up there, like very, very talented teams that always kind of found the banana peel at some point. But those defenses, those late 90s Penn State defenses were crazy good. And LeVar Arrington was a big reason why. Yeah,
LeVar Arrington, one of my lasting thoughts about him, other than, yes, a great player, was his presence took away from how great Niall Diggs was at Ohio State, because they played roughly the same time. Niall Diggs did a lot of the same kind of stuff. He even had a play where he leaped over somebody and tackled them. But I think Diggs maybe was an All-American one year, but it was all about LeVar Arrington, and really for good reason. The guy was big. He was fast. He just covered a lot of ground. And yeah, there's not much. I don't know that there's anything. He was not overrated. He was not, he was not a pile jumper, as a lot of later on Penn State linebackers got labeled. He was legit, and he was fun to watch.
Yeah, and just looking through this year's class, leaping over the line to make crazy athletic plays seems to be something of a theme in this year's class, because Roy Williams, the former Oklahoma defensive back, is also in the class. Do you remember the most memorable moment of Chris Sims' career that wasn't a Chris Sims highlight?
Absolutely. Diving over and then what? Oh yeah. There's a goal line situation,
yes.
Right? And
yeah,
grabbed it. That obviously we all have that image of him doing that. He's also the guy that got horse collar, like outlawed in college football, because he would bring guys down by the collar all the time from my recollection. Like I attribute that to him. I think that's true because he also did that in the NFL and was really good until he stopped being good. And I don't know if that was because they took the rule out and he's like, well, now I don't know how to tackle, but he was big time and he was fun to watch. And he was also a big hitter and a playmaker.
Another name that Ohio State fans will probably remember. The older Ohio State fans will probably remember. This is a little before my time, but Michigan defensive tackle Mark Messner, who was kind of those mid to late 80s, the late Bo Schembechler era teams, 85 to 88, was on several teams that beat Ohio State, including the Jim Harbaugh 86 guarantee game in Ohio Stadium, and then the 34-31. What was the name of the John Colazar game in 1988. That was there were a couple games in there that were pretty memorable. He was also on the field for the Earl headband game, so there's a happier memory for Ohio State fans. Do you remember Mark Messner at all, or not really?
I remember his mustache, and that's about it. And I'm just looking now at Google, and yes, I did remember it correctly. But a lot of guys had the cheesy mustaches back then, and he was one of them.
Unlike today. Anyway, so a couple SEC players that I'll just mention real quick from when I was in college: Champ Bailey, defensive back from Georgia, Kevin Falk, running back from LSU. Two guys who I remember watching a lot of ESPN primetime games with those guys in them. But the other guy that the one that I got like angry at, that I was like, that's not right, that's not cool. Like, it is not cool that he's eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame. Andrew Luck. Stanford quarterback, 2009 to 2011. Like, nope, that can't be right. That must be a misprint. He's not eligible for another 10 years probably. But hey, he made Jim Harbaugh look like a good coach. So that's enough to get you in, I guess.
You stole my joke, Tom. I was going to cut you off before you got it, but yes, if he can make Jim Harbaugh look that good, then I'm guessing this is almost as first ballot as you get in college football. One other name that I'd like to mention, Michael Crabtree, because he was as dominating a wide receiver as we've ever seen. I think he finished second in the Heisman, second or third in the Heisman, and very well could have won it. And I think 2008 was just, he was a red zone machine. I thought he was going to be much better in the NFL than he was, but he obviously Texas Tech, there was a system there, and you're going to catch a lot, but I thought he was more than just a system receiver, and he was spectacular and fun to watch and could do it all, and was he had some ridiculous catches as well.
Well, you think back to Michael Crabtree, and it's like, if I say Michael Crabtree, Texas Tech, which I bet I can tell you which play you're thinking of. Tony, is it the one on the sideline against Texas? Like when Texas was, I think, number one, right? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah. I mean, that was, I think the game ended up 38-35, something like that. I mean, just an incredibly, incredibly talented receiver. And, Mike Leach has had a lot of receivers. They did not all put up numbers like Michael Crabtree did. And I think the thing to me about Crabtree and Andrew Luck is, before those guys showed up, those programs were really not all that much. Texas Tech was a little bit better than Stanford was prior to Luck, but Stanford was like terrible. Like they went through Walt Harris and Buddy Tevens and just like a whole series of coaches where it was just like they just went 2-9 every year, and they weren't very good. They weren't a very entertaining 2-9. And then Harbaugh shows up, and Andrew Luck shows up, and is kind of changed the game there. I mean, that was not quite he was not the very, very start of that, because Harbaugh had his first year was 2007, because they pulled up. That was the game where they were the 41-point favorite. So that was a couple of years before Luck, but that was when Stanford took that step to become Rose Bowl participant Stanford, which was a very different thing. And the same thing for Texas Tech. Texas Tech was always kind of kind of like you think of Texas Tech now. When Michael Crabtree was there, Texas Tech was like, you better watch your butt because Texas Tech is going to get you. Texas Tech. I think they were ranked number 2 at one point that season as well, Texas Tech, because they're playing so well. And I correct me if I'm wrong on that, Tom. I know you won't have time in this show, but I'm sure you'll find a way. I'm looking back at Andrew Luck, and he redshirted
as a true freshman, which I don't know why, unless he's one of these nerds that wants to get acclimated to school. I mean, come on, Stanford really isn't that tough. Can't you just go and play and do schoolwork? But then started as a redshirt freshman, and then obviously in his 3 years' time. Do you know how many touchdowns he threw as a redshirt freshman under Jim Harbaugh in his first year as a starter?
This answer is either going to be like 9 or like 30. I'm going to say 9.
It was 13.
Pretty close. All right.
Yeah. Do you know how many he threw in his last year?
30.
37. So he got better under the famed quarterback whisperer, Jim Harbaugh.
A couple other names of note. Sylvester Croom, you were kind of reading down the list to me. You said Sylvester Croom, pause, as a player, which if you remember the Sylvester Croom era at Mississippi State, that will not surprise you. But yes, Sylvester Croom, former Alabama center, got in. Chuck Ely, the former Toledo quarterback when Toledo was like just absolutely running stuff up in Northwest Ohio in the late 60s, early 70s. And another former Toledo coach who you may remember as a Missouri coach, Gary Pinkel. He was he had some health issues a few years back. Otherwise, I do wonder if he would have just kind of stuck it out, because he turned Missouri. I mean, this is another program where it was like they were nothing. Missouri was just kind of like, that was the school where Andy Katzenweier almost killed the quarterback that one time, and they have a big rock am in the end zone. End of interesting. Oh, and they were the team that lost the 5th down game. Like, that was the history of Missouri football until Gary Pinkel got there, and then in 2007. He had them on the verge of playing for the national championship. Like that is a pretty good football coach.
Yeah, he was. And growing up in Northwest Ohio, I remember him being at Toledo, and also remember hearing about Chuck Ely and those Toledo teams. Like, he led them. He was 35-0 as a starter over his 3 seasons.
Is that good?
It's not Martell good, but it's pretty good. And, they played fewer games back then, but he was just one of those guys you grew up hearing about, even though it's just Toledo. But yeah, Gary Pinkel as well. And then that, I think, Tom, everybody who participated in the 2007 season of college football should be in the Hall of Fame. What do you think?
You're not going to get any argument from me. The single greatest football season in the history of college football. I mean, this was a pretty good season, but the single greatest season in the history of college football, 2007. I mean, Boston College was number 2 at one point. USF was number 2 at one point. I was on the field at a Pitt WVU game when West Virginia just needed to beat a 4-8 Pitt team to go to the national championship. Didn't happen. Kansas and Missouri played an extremely consequential game the last week of the season. It might have been the Big 12 championship game with the national championship stakes on the line. Yeah, it was 2007 was. I feel like we could do a whole series of podcasts at some point over the summer over just like telling the stories of the 2007 season, because it all sounds just completely ludicrous. So yes, put the 2007 season in the College Football Hall of Fame, you cowards. The people who are getting inducted they'll be inducted on December 6th at the National Football Foundation annual awards dinner. So that'll happen in like 11 months. So mark your calendars now. But yes, there are going to be some great names in there, and some much too recent names for my liking. So, Tony, as always, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, as always, Tom.
I don't always have you, or thank you as always. Okay, it doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about that. All right, we're here to wrap up the show. I will wrap up the show by telling you can subscribe to all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it, we're there. Also, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. We have lots of great shows there. Hit that bell, subscribe to our channel. You get notified every time we post a new one. Tony and I will be doing a new episode of Buckeye Weekly a little bit later on today, talking about the new early enrollees for Ohio State, kind of introducing all of them, running through each of them, and sort of what we're expecting from them this year. So hopefully you will enjoy that one as well. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.